Hello, this is the Straight Outta BS podcast. I'm Jordan, your host, as usual. Wanted to thank you guys. As usual, we're almost at, I believe it's like 700 hours of view time, and like we're almost at 4K views. So let's work towards 5K, and let's work towards 800 hours of view time. That's awesome. I want to do a moment of silence for the person still suffering. So on the count of 3, I'm going to do a moment of silence. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you for that. And let's see, was there anything else? I don't think there's really anything else. I didn't realize that. I don't know what happened. Did you hear that? Did you hear that? Like, shh.
I can't hear.
Hold on a second. Okay. It's like going away. That's hella weird. That was hella weird. Okay. So, what was I saying? Where did I start to say?
I don't know where you're going with that. It actually went like we couldn't hear you at all.
Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, I don't know what was up with that. So, oh yeah, I remember what I was gonna say. There was a video, so YouTube uploaded the video. I think it was Mila, I can't remember exactly how to say her name, but it uploaded it another time, the first part of that for some reason yesterday when I uploaded my other video, and I was like, what's going on? Why are you uploading this 2 times? So yeah, that's why there's a second uploading of that one. So I don't know what's up with that, but yeah, oh yeah, and also let's get the view count up. We're only at 8 on the latest video. Let's get that up to like 30s. Let's do it. Let's get up there. Come on. I know it'll happen like within the next couple of days, but come on, guys, let's do it. I know there's tons of us out there. I have 106 subscribers, so we should be able to at least pull 30 on each one. Not complaining, I'm just saying let's put in the work. And yeah, without further ado, I want to introduce my guests for the days. This is Jenna and Chelsea. So go ahead and introduce yourself one by one, and just let us know what school you went to, what years, and whatnot.
Hi, I'm Chelsea Filer. I went to a W.W.A.S.P school called Casa by the Sea and High Impact. If you're not familiar with what W.W.A.S.P is, it's the Worldwide Association of Specialty Programs. It was an umbrella corporation with quite a few programs under its, I guess you could say under the organization, and using the W.W.A.S.P model. And to this day, I believe there were 32 W.W.A.S.P programs. Most, if not all of those, are shut down. There have been quite a few spin-offs that are still open today, but none of those programs necessarily claim to be W.W.A.S.P programs anymore. The organization is now defunct, but there are many W.W.A.S.P survivors in our W.W.A.S.P survivors group. We have, I believe it's over 4,500, so almost 5,000, and many active members, many more coming in every day. I know that we estimate that there is like over 200,000 survivors that we've been able to make contact with. 200,000, that's quite a few people. So we can definitely say that this issue has been widespread and affected quite a few people. And that's why we created W.W.A.S.P Survivors, to be able to connect everybody together and to share experiences, validate each other, and to hopefully channel all of this pain and trauma into progress. And, obviously our intention now is to press for legislation to, mostly to reform our protection and advocacy systems, which protect children in these programs and shut these programs down. I know that it's kind of said that, like, oh, we want to reform the industry, but I personally don't believe that the industry can be reformed. We can, end the practices by holding them accountable. But just like we did with W.W.A.S.P, The more that we use our voices, the more we're speaking out, the more that we are sharing our stories, the less likely it is that these places are going to be able to get away with what they're doing, and the more likely it is that they're just going to get defunded and shut down organically. So that's my thing. This is Jenna. I'd like to introduce Jenna, my partner. We have created ICAPA, the Institutional Child Abuse Prevention and Advocacy Network, together. And we are on that same wavelength, working on legislation to address this industry and this issue.
I'm Jenna. Oh, Jenna. I went to Spring Creek Lodge back in 2000 to 2001. So I'm an older survivor of that generation. I was there for 18 months in just the one program. And I got into advocacy. Well, I've been into community advocacy for a while. I got into the survivor community advocacy a few years ago when I met Chelsea, and she was my mentor. And we've done some social movements. We've done some things along the way. And I'm excited for us to be focused on the legislation, because our goal was always legislation. I got into this when we changed the laws in Montana. When I found out that Chafin and Cameron and Mike Linderman were still running programs, I was not okay with that. I felt compelled to go testify and share my experience. And that started me off. Once I realized that we can actually change laws and close programs where they are driven out of the state, it really made me excited to do this for the whole nation. So that's my story of how I got involved in this.
Awesome, awesome. Okay, and were you guys transported when you got there? Did your parents?
Yeah, I was transported in the middle of the night, hired escorts, and taken from Washington State to Montana.
Yeah, same. I was definitely ripped from my bed in the middle of the night, not knowing where I was going, and they actually transported me over the border to Mexico. Casa was in Mexico, so that was pretty scary. I could definitely tell you there was a point where I thought that I was being like kidnapped for ransom or something, and going to, someone was going to find my severed head somewhere out in the desert. So yeah, no, not a great experience, especially at, 14, 15. But yeah, no, I think that that's a similar story to most survivors have that experience, and that's the introduction that you get to this, next almost 2 years of your life of hell. And of course, it's not a good start to that experience.
For sure. And just for the people that maybe this is their first video, for me, I was tricked into going up there. My parents brought me up there, and pretty much I just started smoking weed, drinking a little bit of alcohol. Now it was like a week or 3 days to a week away from home, and finally came home, and my parents were like, okay, we're going to check out the school tomorrow. And I was like, okay, whatever, as long as I'm back to do my schoolwork so I can do homework in the next day. And then like, oh yeah, we'll be back. And so I slept like the majority of the time, woke up and I kept on being like, where are we going? Because we're not there yet. Where are we actually going? And they're like, oh no, we're just going to check this school out. It'll be all good. Everything will be cool. And they're like, just go back to sleep. And so I woke up, and we were driving up that long road up to Spring Creek. Lilith, get off. We were driving up that long road to Spring Creek, and it was hella snowy. So at first I thought it was this fucking ski resort. I was like, are we going skiing? Like, what is this? And so we drove up there, and then they like dropped me off in South Central, and they're like, do you know why you're here? You know why you're here, right? And I was like, no, not really. And they're like, you're here because you're a bad kid. Your parents like, they brought you here because they couldn't deal with you. You're a problem child. All that bullshit. And then pretty much took me to the back room, and then my parents left, and my dad looked at me, and he's like, I'm sorry, I have to do this. And I was like, please don't do this to me. And then they're just like, they just left me. And to this day, my dad still tells me, he's like, that was literally the hardest day of my life, was leaving you there. He said, I really didn't want to do that. Because like my dad was like kind of forced into it, I guess you could say, because my mom kind of held like divorce over his head. She was like, essentially from what I gathered over the years, is that they won't really give me a straight answer on it, but from what I understand, you know, she was kind of like, you know, we need to get him help, and this is what I feel like is going to help him, so you're either supporting me or you're against me type thing. And so my dad really didn't want to do it, but he was kind of just going along with it for my mom. So that's my story of how I got there, and I was there 22 months.
There was a lot of kids that were there just because of custody disputes, and in fact, that still happens all the time. And there was a lot of kids there that got sent because they disclosed abuse happening in the house. And so, I mean, I know the majority of us are transported or tricked. Rarely people go with consent, like full consent of what they're signing up for. But my heart always really went out to those kids that disclosed abuse and then were sent to that place.
Right. A lot of times because the parents were trying to hide them from CPS because CPS was already investigating. And I mean, that just shocks me. That actually shocked me about my situation as well, is that, you know, I had a counselor that I was working with, you know, teachers at my school, you know, other adults in my life that didn't even seem to question why I had disappeared. And you would think if there was an open CPS investigation that my disappearance would have been even more worrisome. And I know that that is the case for a lot of survivors, a lot of kids that were in there. They essentially just, you know, were lost track of. And that's one of the reasons why Jenna and I are focusing on the ICPC, which is the Interstate Compact on the Placement of Children, because that is the one office, the one government entity that is supposed to be keeping track of these kids, especially the kids going from one state to another. And you know, for the most part, this process works. It works for foster children mostly, but it's supposed to also cover kids being sent into residential placements. The problem is that even on a federal level, they've been able to exempt parent placements. And since a lot of these places are not licensed, there's really no way to track the kids getting sent from out of state into religious programs, for example, because there's no way to track it. There's no one that tracks it, that's supposed to track it. The law states that they don't have to track it. And the law states that these places don't have to be licensed. So there's no government entity that actually like holds those records. So essentially we're just seeing like kids just falling through the cracks. And I can tell you from a personal experience, that's definitely what it felt like, that I had just been lost and nobody cared where I went. I could honestly say that I think that there was only like one of my friends that actually called my mom and checked in and said, what the hell, where'd she go? You know? So I honestly think that, this is probably one of the biggest challenges that we have now as advocates is to, you know, say, okay, this was the experience that I had, and you know, this is why it's important for us to change what the problem it has been in the past and what the problem still is today. It's 2022, and we still don't have a database that's tracking these kids and these programs and the abusers, and especially the abusers that want to jump from state to state to state. So, I mean, someone has to stand up and use their voice and say, hey, look, no more. We got to change this. No kid can be left behind.
For sure, for sure. And I wanted to point out too, because I have had like Jenna was saying, it's a lot more rare for people to go there knowing that they're going there. I have had a few people on my podcast that did know that, but my thing is, how can you even consent to something if you're being gaslit about it? If you're not even being told what it actually is? How can you even consent to that? Because consent, by definition, is that you know what is going to happen you know, everything's going to happen and you're still okay with that. And you're saying, yeah, this is an okay thing to do. So no, they're not consenting to it because they're gaslighting the whole situation. They're like, oh yeah, we're going to ride ponies and whatever the fuck, we're going to go on hikes and all that shit. And that never happens, you know, like, so.
And also
false
consent.
advertising.
Yeah.
Consent can be taken away. You know, if something starts to feel inappropriate, you should have access to communication to be able to say, this isn't what I signed up for. I think this is abusive or whatever. And that doesn't happen. I didn't get my first phone call for a year. Well, 9 months, but still.
Did they give you a reason for that?
I wasn't level 3. I couldn't graduate the seminars. And back then you had to be level 3 to get a phone call. There were no exceptions unless your parents demanded it.
Okay. Yeah, that was one of the things that changed after I got there. After I got there, I think it was 60 to 90 days at the most. But they could still curtail it if they felt like you weren't pulling your weight, you know, or, you know,
Getting with the program.
You know?
Yeah.
So, yeah,
manipulating.
and it's holding something over your head that everybody's going to want. The very first thing that I wanted when I got there was like, look, I want to talk to my parents. Fuck this. I want to talk to my parents. Like, fuck this. I want to talk to them. I'm going to get out of here, you know, tell them what's going on. And so that's one of the main things that I wanted right away is I want to talk to my parents, man. Screw all this other crap. I want to talk to my parents. Like,
yeah, but you find out pretty quickly that that's not something that you're even allowed to ask for. I mean, I remember my first day, actually. You know, I got there, obviously the ride over there was pretty traumatic in and of itself. And then getting to the facility and I don't know, maybe just taking it all in, I really had this strong sense that had my mom known what this place really was, she wouldn't have actually wanted this for me. So I just said, you know, I need to call my mom. Please let me call my mom. Like there's no way this can't be real, you know? And because I guess that I was so upset and demanding to call my mom, they, restrained me. And there were 3 staff members on top of me. Obviously this is my first experience ever being restrained. I mean, before we went into this program, I had, you know, no criminal record, no issues with, I mean, I don't even think I'd like been to detention. So this was a new experience. And then they threw me inside of a bathroom that had been like the toilet was ripped out and there was all these like broken tiles and like open exposed wires and pipes and I mean it was obviously just like kind of like a makeshift isolation chamber, I guess you could call it. And I literally like lived in there for what I assume is 2 weeks. Hard to tell in the time period. The lights were always on. I couldn't tell night, day, anything like that. But, you know, they had me sitting in the corner, facing the corner on these like really cold tiles and stress positions. And if you don't know what stress positions is, it's like sitting Indian style and your hands behind your back and, you know, a staff member or an upper level, which is, you know, junior staff, other students policing the new students. And like anytime I would move, even just like shifting my weight because my feet hurt, my legs were losing circulation, you know, they would call the staff in and then the staff would restrain me again. And like I said, this was like 2 weeks of absolute torture. And I remember one of the times that I was being restrained by the administrator. His name was Jade Robinson. I mean, it was so violent. It was so much more violent than the other restraints I had experienced, which were not fun anyway. I mean, he must have like just gotten something out of it, some kind of power trip, because he really enjoyed like causing me pain, like, you know, popping my arms out of the sockets and like putting me in like submission holds and like choke holds and stuff. And I remember that he sliced open my leg. I had a huge gash on my leg from the broken tiles in the bathroom. And I guess during that scuffle, I guess you could say, he said that I scratched him.
Of course.
And apparently because I scratched him, that was the reason that they sent me to High Impact. And I mean, we can get to High Impact, but like, there's no reason whatsoever to send someone to like a grueling concentration camp almost, and especially not for him getting accidentally injured while he was injuring me, you know?
If he was even injured.
I don't think he was. Yeah.
You know? Yeah, it's crazy. I what I've noticed is that, like, when Spring Creek first opened, from what I hear about people's experiences is that it seems that they used to be a lot more hands-on and physical with people, and then went like more towards my time when I was there. I feel like they still did the restraints and all of that for sure, but I feel like they had a bigger emphasis on something that is called white torture, which is essentially everything else. Have you guys heard the term white torture? It's essentially everything but physical. So it's like, for example, like intervention, putting you in a room all by yourself, study hall, taking away condiments, things that like you really want and things that you need that you that are not given to you. So it's essentially, which is what they do in Guantanamo Bay, places like that, is they do physical torture, and then they do what they call white torture. And we're doing that to prisoners, and there's still activists and rights activists that are like, oh, but it's fucked up to do this to prisoners, but you're over here doing it to teenagers that are fucking, for the most part, innocent. So it's like, it's crazy. It's crazy.
I feel like I was at Spring Creek through one of the transitions, and I think it was based on how many kids were at the facility, because when I first got there, all of the beds were not filled in our family. It was much smaller, and with that, like, Cameron was much more hands-on as a director. He was constantly having facility meetings and putting people on challenges, putting people just, it's like mini seminars almost. And then, so you had that part of it, which it was just like more intimate, but then all these programs kept getting shut down. Like there was a death at Jamaica. So instead of them giving those girls counseling, or all the children there that saw that counseling and treatment, they gave them upper levels and shipped them over to Spring Creek and said, don't ever talk to anybody about this. And then I was there, we had some Samoa boys there, which is confusing to me because that doesn't make sense. So I feel like maybe they came over and I don't know, I think Samoa might have been hanging around longer than what after they were shut down, because we had some kids come from there, but they were supposedly closed. So that didn't make sense. Yeah. And then another program shut down. I forget which one. Oh, Morova. That shut down during my time there too. So the W.W.A.S.P program started to close, and their thing was, that's when they started to separate and be like, oh, that's out of state. They're not really W.W.A.S.P. They're just one of our partners. They're not us. The way we do things in the country is much different. And it was, I mean, we all went to the same seminars. We all had the same rules. You can compare rule lists. We all had a version of worksheets. We all had a version of the Hobbit or isolation or whatever. It was the same program, but it's about what abuse they could get away with before getting attention from the surrounding area, in my opinion.
Yeah. Pushing until, you know, seeing how far they can push it before people start, you know, no, fuck this, you know.
Yeah, they couldn't be entirely overt. I mean, I would say they were overt, but they couldn't be, you know, as overt as they were, let's say, in the times of Straight and Sea-Doo, Synanon, like some of these places that existed, you know, before W.W.A.S.P, mainly because they knew that this was still a moneymaker. You know, this was a business, and That's, I think, primarily why they didn't surround it with like a religious aspect to it, because they really wanted to make sure that they were getting as many clients as possible and not only focusing on the, you know, religious clients. I mean, obviously they did have quite a few, and that was, I would say, part of the program. Like, it was definitely encouraged to either become a Mormon or to, you know, read the Mormon Bible, things like that. But for the most part, that wasn't what the program was centered on, you know, in contrast to a lot of these programs that are very much centered on scripture and religion. But I mean, I do believe that that was on purpose, because I mean, ultimately this was like an MLM scheme, you know. This was very much a business, a moneymaker, profiting enterprise. So pretty much all of the decisions that they made, not only in how they treated us as children, but also how they interacted with our families, and they, you know, kind of kept our families on the hook with that hard sell. Our case managers were salesmen. Yeah. I mean, most of them were not actually therapists. They were salesmen. They had a script, and that they had quotas. Like, they needed to keep us in the program as long as possible. That was their intention. And the same thing with the seminars. I really think that, you know, if you analyze the seminars and what they were teaching us, they were teaching us a script. They were teaching us what to say to sound as if this program works. That way, when we talk to our parents on the phone and we say things like, I've learned to be accountable for my actions, and I know that I need to be accountable for how I put myself in this position and the decisions that I made that led me to this. You know, that's the way that, you know, adults speak, not the way that children speak. But by teaching us that jargon, it signaled to our parents that the brainwashing essentially was working. But on our side of things as kids, it was like, okay, you got to learn the script. You got to, you know, memorize it. You have to speak it. You even have to believe it in order to be convincing enough. But that's playing the game. You're playing the game to survive. You're playing the game to get out. I mean, I'm sure all of us either heard or said, you know, you just got to fake it till you make it. And that was just so that we could get out. It wasn't necessarily because this was something that we were taking to heart or believed in. Although I will say that the brainwashing did work in a lot of ways. You know, I think a lot of us did get out and had that the struggle or the process of, was this therapy? Were these just like a few bad apples that made this experience not good, or was the whole system itself broken? And I think that I did come to that realization. I mean, I believed that it was abusive while I was in there, so I definitely knew that. But like, having actually researched it and talked to so many other survivors that had the same exact experience, and realized that this was the W.W.A.S.P program model was a system. And that system was just in every way not therapeutic and very insidious in a lot of ways, especially the use of the seminars, because I mean, it very much was like mind control. And not only were they controlling us, and mostly through fear and intimidation and, you know, force, because we didn't really have much of a choice to go to these seminars or not. But they were also heavily manipulating our parents, and our parents were going through this same system, but more tailored specifically for them. And I would definitely have to say that it operated much like an MLM for our parents.
And what does MLM mean for people that don't know what MLM means?
A multi-level marketing system. And I mean, obviously we can just say it's like a cult, you know?
Yeah, of course.
It's very much like a cult.
And
And
no
but
accidents. that Utah is the #1 MLM place in the country.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is big business. It's big business in Utah. Seems like there's quite a few other states that have kind of caught on to, being safe havens for these kinds of places, having lax laws, no enforcement, no jurisdiction, no licensing. I mean,
smaller towns usually.
Yeah. And then the workforce is just the people in the town, and of course they're not going to endanger the best job in the whole county to go and tell when they know in their hearts that what's happening there is wrong. But you know what I can actually say, having spoken to other staff members that were either staff at my place, other places, they do describe a pretty similar cult-like experience where even the staff were put through this weird indoctrination and became fearful and were intimidated and had a very toxic work environment. And if you look at it from their perspective, this very much was survival for them as well, because this was like how they're feeding their children, right? So, I can't excuse anybody for not reporting abuse, but I can certainly understand how this system affected them as well.
And at Spring Creek, it was multi-generational. We had so many staff members where their entire family worked at the facility. They were married to the person. I mean, it was so small town in all ways you can think of. And we would work on new family moms when they would come in, or college students. We'd be like, hey, you should go report this. Please get this out. And we got one where I thought for sure she was calling in and making a report. She quit the next day. She would cry herself to bed every night. And she used to say, nobody's going to believe me. You don't understand who these people are. I'm nobody in this town. Nobody's going to do anything if I make that call, except for I'll put a target on my back. And she would say, I'm struggling because I feel like I need to come here, because she was obviously a good family mom. But she didn't want to be a part of that system. But then she relied on that. Like, she had no other option. There were no other jobs out there.
Yeah. So
and a lot of staff believe that, like, they're pretty much the only one that can actually help these kids, that are going to be treating them well. And if they're not there, then the other people that work there are going to be able to get away with what they're doing. So, and it's kind of a catch-22 for anybody that has any kind of common sense or empathy to be working at these places.
Yeah, I don't think I could have worked at a place like that with my empathy. I don't think. No. I mean, if I ever were to have worked there, I would have like special case like everybody all the time. I just would have been like, look, I'm gonna yell at you, like, that you got a consequence, but you're not gonna get it, type thing.
Like, I give everybody candy bars every week.
Yeah, exactly. You're getting hooked up. Thanks for going over and above on all your schoolwork. The entire family. Thank you guys, and you didn't even do it. That's the kind of things I do. But let's see. So did you either of you spend any time in intervention? Yeah, probably.
Oh yeah.
I didn't.
Oh yeah. In Casa it was called R&R, which restriction room, I think. I always thought it was funny, R&R. Rest and relaxing. Was not relaxing. No. You know how I explained in the very first day that was R&R. And then there were other times after that, probably like 3 or 4. Now, the way that it worked in the program, a lot of times people would be kind of made an example out of. And I was definitely one of those kids. Now, I have ADD.
What you don't do type thing. Like, look at that person, don't do what they're doing type thing. You don't want to be them type thing, Yeah.
Yeah, don't be like them. Now, okay, so I have ADD, I forget things all the time. You know, I speak sometimes without thinking. You know, I hum to myself. You know, things like that. It's really nothing bad, but very much just kind of like a symptom of my disorder. And those were the rules that I was breaking kind of consistently, speaking without permission, off task, looking out the window for more than 20 seconds. I would always forget my pen in my hair and walk into the bathroom and then get in trouble because the rule is you can't like pass notes because that's like runaway plans. So they made it a cat too to walk into the bathroom with a pen. Now I didn't like have it in my pocket, like I was stashing it, like, oh, I'm being sneaky, I'm gonna write a note. No, I literally just forgot there was a pen in my hair. So I would get, you know, all these consequences, and again, all of them stupid. And then I would get trends, and then the trend would send me to worksheets, and worksheets is like detention. You guys had worksheets at Spring Creek, right? Yeah. And being in there a lot because you're already kind of in trouble. Like if I fell asleep in worksheets or something like that, I would get sent to R&R after that. And then, you know, I feel like there were a lot of upper levels that were just kind of like on my case, watching me like a hawk, specifically because, I mean, maybe it was their marching orders or something, because a lot of upper levels would get put into my family as a challenge, like as if I'm like the untamable stallion. Like if you can get Chelsea in line and get her to level 2 or 3 or something like that, then
incentive, yeah,
then you can vote up or something like that. I swear that I have conspiracy theories on that. But yeah, no, I think I was definitely made an example out of, because they called me the sitter, as if like I was always going to sit on level 1 and I was never going to make it out of the program, and literally probably just vote like or take my exit plan at 18. And I mean, I even believed that. Like, I'm like, there's no way that I can get with this program. It doesn't make sense to me. I can't follow the rules. I don't want to be an upper level. I don't want to you know, like I knew that it was abusive, and I complained about it a lot, and I kind of like got other people on my side on that. They're like, wait a second, this place sucks. I mean, I literally said, you guys realize that we outnumber them, right? Like, and yeah, no, they weren't too happy about that. I was like almost causing riots at that point. And so eventually they called my mom and told her to come and pick me up. They're like, there's nothing we can do for her. But yeah, no, I mean, R&R was what they used to not only, you know, try to correct your behavior, but to scare other people into acting right so that they don't end up like you. They don't end up in R&R too.
Yeah, I was pretty much one of those kids at Spring Creek. I would get in trouble. My first year there, I was like, fuck this place, fuck everybody. Like, I was getting removed like every day, like sent to intervention. I spent 3 days in intervention one time. And I've told this story a couple times, but I got out, and since my body wasn't, there's like no sunlight or anything that gets in there. So when I stepped out, I literally collapsed. My body didn't know how to fucking like stand or walk or anything, because I'd been isolated from all the fucking stimuli from outside and whatnot for so long. And I thought I'd only been in there like a couple hours. It was crazy. But I can attest, it's like factual, at least at Spring Creek, that when I was on upper levels, like you would get incentivized. They would straight say, like, there's certain kids, like you need to consequence them this many times. Like it's for real. Like you're not just tripping. Like that really did happen. Like, and people would pick favorites. And that's why when I got on the team, I was like, because I spent so long rebelling, and so you guys know, I almost got sent to Jamaica. That's why I shaped up, because they were like, we'll just send you to Jamaica and not even tell your parents, and then we'll just tell them when you're there, if we tell them. And then I was just like, okay, fuck that. I'll do whatever you need me to do. And so when I got on the upper levels, I was like, you know, I'm going to do what they need me to do, but I'm also not going to be an asshole about it, and I'm not going to be a dick about it. And if I see certain people getting picked on, then I'm actually going to take them under my wing and be like, if you fucking consequence them, then I'll consequence you. How's that? You want to self-correct your disrespect or self-correct your bullying? Like, don't just like single out somebody that's obviously getting picked on because of their accent or whatever the fuck it is. Like, they're already struggling enough. It's already hard enough to be in here. You don't need to be an asshole to them and like target them, because also growing up, I was picked on a lot. So I know how that felt. So when I got on the upper levels, it was a little bit different because I saw it from a different perspective and I was trying to help people as much as possible. Like, yeah, I was brainwashed and all that, but I also feel like anybody that I've asked has been like, you know, thanks so much for being there for me and just like not being a dick. And like, you know, I'd yell out the consequences to show up, but I would maybe write down half the consequences at the end of the day. And for the people that I didn't write down the consequences, I would have them, there's that fucking point. There's that fucking poison. It's so crazy. Hold on a second, maybe it's my fan.
Yeah.
Okay, there it goes. Okay, don't know what that is. There's some interference. It's the elites that they don't want me talking about this. They don't want me talking about this.
You're on a list.
But yeah, I would just help people and like in seminars, instead of screaming at them like you're a whore and all that shit, I'd be like, you know what, just keep it up. You're almost through this. Just, you know, keep pulling through. Like, you're almost through it. Like, just trust me. You just gotta make it through this. Shit'll get better if you make it through this. And like, I even told some people, I was like, look, if you have to fake it, if you have to make up some shit that you went through and like fake cry it, do that shit. Like, because a lot of the time, if you didn't cry or like look like you were really affected by some shit, like even if you didn't have trauma, they're like, oh, you don't really want to be here, da-da-da-da. Like they would, people that sat the seminars, they would be like, look, like if you see somebody like that and you don't call them out, then you're going to get consequence. So I just saw it from a different perspective when I was on the team, and I tried to help as many people as I could. There were a few people, you know, like if you got on my nerves and like started picking on me, yeah, I'm gonna consequence the fuck out of you. But like if you were like, you know, other than that, like if you weren't directly coming at me disrespectful or somebody else, like most of the time with me, you'd probably slide by with no consequences. And I would just, you know, pull them over and be like, look, you know, you did this wrong, right? You know, you fucked up, right? And they acknowledge it and be like, cool. You're not going to get a consequence. You acknowledged it. You said you were wrong, you know, I won't do it again. That's fine. Because to me, taking away points from somebody, all it's really going to do is break them down. Like eventually, if they get enough point, because I was one of those people that got consequence so many times through the day that I was just like, well, fuck it. I already have no points for the day. I'm already in the negatives. Like, why should I even care? So I really tried to help as many people as I could. But yeah, it's definitely corrupt. And I can attest, like, they did target people and they did have certain people before they went into families. And there were certain groups of people that would click up too and consequence certain groups of people. And
right. Yeah. It was pretty much like a popularity contest once you get to the upper levels, for sure. I mean, I even saw that from my point of view. I could see that there was you know, a group of people who were considered like, I don't know, I guess we called them student council, popular or whatever. And some people just never made it. They never made it past like level 4 because those other people held them down. And that was kind of a big part of the program, I think, of the psychological abuse of the program, was that you were either in the position where you had to break your own morals, your own values to step on other people to get ahead. Mm-hmm. Or you...
That was encouraged, yeah.
Right, exactly. Or you were the one that would be constantly systematically bullied, essentially. Like, it really encouraged people to either become sociopaths or to become victims of sociopaths. And I mean, another thing you touched on was the attack therapy. Now, we saw that a lot in the seminars, where you're very much encouraged to just pick on somebody and to say to them, look, it doesn't look like you're emotional enough about things that you've been through in your life that would validate your reason for being here. So you're going to have to, dig deeper and tell me more, to the point where like, we didn't even know what to say, making stuff up. Like, I don't know, I was in a gang and I sold drugs, because I am, you know what I mean? Like, no, none of us actually did that. Well, I mean, I don't know. I sure didn't. But, that attack therapy was a big part of the psychological abuse, because we were pitted against each other, like even on lower levels. You were expected to, one, be vulnerable with your family and tell them things about your life, about yourself, your fears, your insecurities, your past. A lot of us were victims of sexual abuse, domestic violence, things like that. And that was just used as weapons against you, that you were literally just telling these people what to then give you harsh feedback about, and what to, go behind your back and talk about you. And I mean, there's nothing therapeutic about that. There's nothing therapeutic about using your past to shame you. It's the opposite. We're supposed to be there for each other, when you're going to therapy, real therapy, and to work through the things that we've been through by giving each other support and understanding. And that's just like the just polar opposite of what we experienced in the program. And I think that's why a lot of survivors just don't trust therapy, is because we have this fear, but I mean, it's a legitimate fear, because it's what we experienced, that that's what therapy is. But I think to anybody that is struggling with wanting to, work through their issues, but they're afraid of going to therapy because they think it's going to be the same process, I just want to say, I've been through real therapy, and I've been through what's not therapy, and that is not therapy. That is not treatment. That is torture. And we do, as survivors, need to access services that are going to be able to help us to process all of this, and process what we went through, and process the guilt, and process trauma. So, please don't be afraid to reach out for help. If you need it, because it's not going to be the same. What we experienced was very much not real therapy. And I think that light bulb can go off for a lot of people, especially at our age, when they realize that there's better services out there than what we experienced. So I encourage anybody that's struggling right now to reach out and find real therapy, evidence-based.
Trauma informed. I'm in
Yeah.
trauma informed therapy, and I cannot tell you how much it has helped. My therapist actually explained to me that psychological abuse attacks the same area of the brain that language happens. And so with the forced silence plus psychological abuse, it explains why there's this delay in survivors even being able to express what was done. So it's helped me to put language to it. It's helped me to tell my story. And they don't give feedback. Like, feedback isn't a part of therapy. Like, think about that. How can you tell somebody giving them feedback on an emotion? Like, that's not how the human experience works. Mm-hmm. And so they just created, I think what it was just a way to break us with shame. And especially at that age, when you were a teenager, you were supposed to be figuring out your identity. And let's be real, what happened there was, I think of W.W.A.S.P as being like the ultimate image management company for teenagers. Mm-hmm. Like, my parents said, I don't like this about her. I don't like this. And it was stupid things. Like, they didn't accept that I was a vegetarian, so I had to eat the meat meals. It was like, whatever they didn't accept about your identity or your image was up for debate, and you were going to get feedback on yourself until you perfected that. Mm-hmm. into a way that was acceptable. And so it was like, I didn't have a hard time following the rules. I'm a very rule follower by nature. And so I sat on the lower levels, level 3, with like enough points to graduate the program for a year. And But then they called me a sitter too, a sitter on level 3. And so then they threatened Jamaica, high impact. High impact was new back then. They were sending everybody that had been sitting on the lower levels for like, if you hit the year spot, you were going to high impact. But at that time they required parent consent, or maybe because I didn't have a passport, I'm not sure. But I didn't end up going. And so they pushed me through the program. Finally, when I graduated, accountability took me 7 times to get through that seminar because I would not take accountability. That was the 3rd one for us. We didn't have orientation. We had discovery. I went through that 3 times. Focus, went through that 3 times. Accountability, went through that 7 times because I wouldn't take accountability of my rape. And they kept saying I was fake. I got that one a lot. I was fake, or that I was scandalous, which I was because I thought the program was bullshit. So, I don't know what to do. It was like I wasn't trying to work it. I was trying to survive and get through school because my parents said, as soon as you graduate high school, we're pulling you. And so once they found that out, they started pushing me through the program, gave me the junior staff experience. Once I graduated high school, actually even before that, Cameron had me babysitting at his house almost every day. And so I was pretty special case at that point. And then I was pulled on my 18-month date.
You mentioned accountability, and I think it's important to mention that like the concept of accountability in the program was very much different than what accountability actually means to everyone else. And I do think that was very much part of the psychological abuse itself, especially when it came to the words you use, being accountable for your rape, for instance. Using that as an example, the concept of accountability is, what decisions did you make that, led you to this position that you put yourself in that led to this terrible thing happening to you? How do you take accountability for that? How do you take responsibility for that? And in instances like rape, for instance, you can't blame the fact that a girl got invited to a party. You can't blame the fact that a girl was dating a guy that she, didn't know was going to take advantage of her. You can't blame the fact that she, had a couple drinks, or she, got drugs put into her drink or something like that. You can't blame what they're wearing. But those are all things that, we even have like written quotes by Dr. Shapui, who is like the only psychologist of W.W.A.S.P, saying like, these girls need to take accountability for what they were wearing and what led to this, this incident. And no, I'm sorry, but there's no one to blame for rape but rapists. And to shame a girl, sexually shame her, call her slut, put her through the ringer and give her attack therapy, saying she's not accountable and she's fake, or she's this and she's that, because she was sexually assaulted. I think that shows exactly how opposite of therapeutic the W.W.A.S.P seminars really were. And I don't know if you guys remember what they taught us in the seminar for accountability or what it means, but their example was that if you get into a car accident, you have to, and like you were totally following the law and somebody else T-boned you, you have to take accountability for the fact that you decided to drive down that road that day. You woke up, you got out of bed, you drove down that road. And to this day, that does not make any fucking sense to me. So, yeah, I think accountability is actually kind of a trigger word for a lot of us, because it was used to shame and blame us for being abused. And in that way, they also used that concept for us to somehow accept the treatment we were getting in the program as, we deserved it. because somehow, some way we got ourselves to this program. But I mean, I really think that's quite the cop out there. So, because none of us deserved this. I mean, nobody deserved to be sent to high impact and held in a dog cage. You know, no child deserves to be tortured in the name of treatment. Doesn't matter how bad of a kid we were. I mean, I don't even think we were bad. Like, there are very few 15-year-olds on the planet that could potentially be truly in danger of being dead, insane, or in jail. You know, like, that's, again, just another one of those, you know, hard sell marketing techniques that they used in their little MLM seminars, their little cults, to make it seem like we needed to be there, that we deserved to be there, and that we deserved this, you know, this abuse, this treatment, because the ends justified the means. And I can tell you right now, it didn't. It causes way more harm than good.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm wondering if accountability was the same thing as the principal's seminar I went to. Did accountability have a fuckload of homework that you had to do, like, by, like, exactly how they said how to do it? Was that accountability?
That was all of them for us. I mean, I think they added the seminars, and then I think because WASP was, so they changed the seminars. So when I went through it, it was resource realizations. But when they expanded Spring Creek, like, I'm pre-uniform. I actually picked out your uniform. I'm sorry. But the choices were not good. The choices were not good, okay? But I think that they revamped kind of the facility to try to make it seem more like a boarding school. Like, they started adding parents' weekends. That was new to me through my second half of my program. And they like tried to make it seem like a school. Like, they got very into the PR business, where they would throw us events, but it was not a real event. Usually we were serving the community, and it was only upper levels. And then they would take a bunch of photos and be like, look at all these fun outings we do. Now, that wasn't like the reality, but Spring Creek did go through a big expansion where they added a bunch of extra buildings. They added like double the kids, and they had to snazzy it up to make it look more boarding school-like. And so I think they changed the seminars during that time as well, because our Trail of Lights was way different from what you had. Way different. When I hear your story, I'm like, what? And gravel pit. Did you guys have gravel pit?
We played football in the gravel pit, and I think we did workouts in the gravel pit a couple times, but nothing like Cammie was talking about. I believe that was her name. They came on and did the 3-part where she did the poem about being in the rock pit. We didn't do any of that I remember. But we did play in the rock pit. When it was snowing, we'd play touch football and all that, and do workouts. But nothing like as grueling as from the stories I've heard that they did.
It was a process for us, and they would do it when they felt like the upper levels were getting too comfortable. And like we were forgetting what it was like to be on the lower levels or whatever. And it was seriously moving rocks to the point of collapsing, exercising to the point of collapsing. I've seen so many people pass out from exercise in the hot Montana sun. Like, I didn't even know that was a thing until I saw it for the first time. And it would get really weird. Like, we'd have to, boys and girls weren't allowed to talk or anything. And then all of a sudden we're together in this process, and they're like, have a boy carry you up the hill. I mean, it was weird. We wouldn't get any water. They'd hold up like a big Gatorade, like sports thing. And you'd have to like cup your hands with your muddy hands to like drink water from it, and then get back to moving your rocks or running up this hill. It was really pointless. But I'm pretty sure a lot of kids complained about that. I got hurt. I remember that because I got hurt. I messed up my knee pretty bad, and I didn't get any medical care. And I think people were getting hurt at these a lot, and people were writing letters home to their parents because you would have to request to go to the doctor. So I'd be like, I have all this gravel in my knee that's getting infected. Please send me to the doctor or approve a doctor request. And parents were like, why? what's going on over there? And so I think that's why they did away with some of those processes, because parents could just drive there. That's the difference between being in the country and being out of the country, is if parents think something weird's going on, they would just pull up. And that happened all the times, where kids would just go missing in the middle of the night because their parents thought something was weird, showed up, and pulled them out.
Man, that would have been nice. I mean, I know for a fact my mom never saw High Impact, and I don't think many parents saw High Impact. Otherwise, they would have sent their kids there. I mean, it was literally just like in the middle of the desert, like fencing all around, chain link fence all around. There were 2 sections, one for the boys, one's for the girls. A big concrete slab and a military tent over the concrete slab. And that's where we slept, and that's where we ate, and that's, you know, where we lived, was just on this concrete slab. We didn't have beds. We didn't have, you know, real bathroom, showers, anything like that. It was just dirt and concrete. We didn't have a kitchen. We cooked all of our food on a concrete slab. And we made fires, and we cooked like a big pot of chicken or beans. And it was always either beans, rice, chicken, or breakfast was slop. So, you know, the conditions were absolutely deplorable. The bathrooms weren't actually like really bathrooms. Like we had one shower for everyone, and it was literally just like a hose that like one big drop of water coming from the ceiling. And we all had 7 minutes to get in there, get undressed, get showered, get dressed, and be outside again. So, I mean, just consider that our hygiene was not great. We were outside walking around the track. I think we went out like 4 times a day for either an hour or more each. And that was the point of High Impact. You had to get 2,000 laps. Yeah, in order to graduate. And then the more consequences you got, that takes away your laps. It's essentially like the same, like points, demerits, but laps is what earned you your points. And you could get consequences for like anything. You could get consequences for like looking at somebody, or, you know, like scratching yourself, or sneezing, or clearing your throat, you know, like really stupid stuff, to the point where like they could keep you in there as long as they wanted. Like you would just be in there forever if they wanted you to. And then if they wanted to get rid of you, they could. And the only reason I was sent home was because the FBI was investigating with the Mexican authorities. They flew a helicopter over the compound. And I mean, in the footage that we have of High Impact, I'm in that footage. I'm walking around that track when the helicopter flew over and took that footage.
That's crazy.
So, yeah, and that's the only reason why they sent me back. They sent me back to Casa, was because they kind of had a feeling that they were going to get raided, and sure enough, they did. They got raided as soon as I got back to Casa. Damn it! Like, I could have been home already. But yeah, I mean, like that, and then like the dog cages. Like, what parent would come to a place where their child lives, see that there are dog cages, and say that's fine? That works. Yeah, that's exactly what my child needs. And you know, I asked the owner of the program after it had gotten shut down and he came back to Casa, like, why? Like, why would you put us through this? Like, what was the point of High Impact? And he said, because you have to experience something so awful. You have to experience the worst of the worst so that you will be grateful for what you have at home.
But what's to say that they haven't already experienced horrible shit? You know what I mean? Like, what a lot of people had already experienced horrible shit. You know,
right.
Like. So.
Well, that just means that this is just outsourced child abuse at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wanted to say, for people that want to know more about High Impact, there's one of the most intense interviews I've ever done on this podcast, Marina's interview, just the 3-hour long one. That shit, I almost had to almost stop the interview because I literally was having a panic anxiety attack just from her telling me all the shit she experienced. So, but that's a really, really, I don't know if you guys have seen that episode or not, but that episode's fucking really hit home for me.
It was definitely an intense experience to the point where even explaining it, I disassociate. I see it as more of a movie that I watched and am now explaining to you, because my mind can't go there without feeling extremely angry. And I don't think that that's the point, right? At least for this, we really just want to be able to tell our stories so that other people know that we believe them and we validate them. So we're not trying to trigger anybody. Obviously, there's probably a trigger warning on all of these, because they are our experiences. But yeah, no, anybody that has ever been through High Impact or anything similar, I can certainly understand that and empathize. And, I'm here for anybody that ever wants to talk about their experience.
For sure. Okay. Let's see. You said that your Trail of Lights was a little different than mine, so let's go into that. What was your Trail of Lights like?
There was nothing positive about it. They basically said it was like a second accountability that you did right before you were supposed to go home. And so I was getting pulled, and so I went through. And it started off with physical labor. It kind of, not physical labor, but physical exercise. We were hiking through the woods, blindfolded and holding onto a rope, and we had a buddy with us that would say step this way, step that way. We went to the lower levels, and they made they did this all the time. I remember being on the lower level doing this as well. You would have the junior staff go through and push them and yell things at them and just shove them. So that's kind of how it started off. Then you walk up into the woods, and then you run your number one last time. And then you have your own funeral, and that your number, the identity of having that number dies. And then you have your funeral and you read your eulogy. And then, I don't know, mine ended weird because my Trail of Lights got disrupted because the Harmony, which was Cameron's sister, thought that it was inappropriate. When she came up, they had me on my hands and knees while a bunch of guys were surrounding me, calling me a slut and whore. And she was like, whoa, this went too far. And so they sent me down to the trailer to fill out a statement of fact. And then when I came back, it was just for my funeral. So there was some gaps in there. So I don't know exactly what happened for everybody else, but was not beneficial. It was not a celebratory thing. You're getting ready to graduate and go home. We did do a trust fall.
Crowd surf thing? Did you guys do the trust fall crowd surf thing? You didn't do any of that? Oh, okay.
It wasn't with the whole facility. It was just the people going through Trail of Lights. Because I think what you did was a whole facility. And sometimes they would do that. They would have people crowd surf if we were doing a facility meeting. And Spirit Week, when that came around, they would do it there.
Okay.
But Trail of Lights was not like that. It was supposed to be your last process, unofficial seminar process before you go home. And you were supposed to, your number is supposed to die and be replaced with this new version of you.
Yeah. Your number is essentially the image that you portrayed at home, the image, right?
Yeah, and they said I had male acceptance issues. I mean, that was the thing, is I just couldn't be accountable for the things they wanted me to. I was the person that had to argue about all the shit that didn't make sense. I was always writing grievances when I first got there. I mean, I wrote so many.
Changed, Jenna.
I know. I still love filing complaints. And I just couldn't. I was like, there's a disconnect here for me. My mom is a nurse, and I was very raised in the medical field, like that mentality and that thinking. And I'm like, this doesn't track. You guys, like, I can't get on board with what you're saying here. And so taking accountability, I couldn't do it. And so that male acceptance issue thing hung with me throughout my entire program, along with me being fake and me being scandalous and manipulative. And like, those words are the things that I've been gaslit by them for so long. They're so annoying to me when I hear them, because it's not logically factual. It's not accurate, but this is what they drill into you in order to get you to break that strong sense of self, so you will go along with what they want.
Right.
For sure. Okay, let's go into, like, after you guys came home from first actually, so when you went to High Impact, did you know you were going to go there? How did that happen, like the transportation thing? Because I'm always curious about how they transport people to the High Impact.
Well, I was really close. High Impact was in Tecate, Sonata, so really only like an hour away. So I mean, a lot of girls went to Casa, from Casa to High Impact, just because it was convenient. It was close, right? I did have an inkling that I would go, because I mean, realistically, it was just because I was sitting, not really like getting with the program, being a little bit like resistant. Like, I mean, same thing Jenna said, like, I was always kind of calling it out, like, hey, isn't this illegal? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, we're Americans, don't we still have rights? Like, I don't have a visa. Like, what's going on here? Like, and obviously they didn't really like that, but you know, I didn't make any progress for 6 months. So it was about getting with the program and getting to level 3 or whatever. And my mom was convinced by Jade Robinson, again with that Robinson, with the excuse that when he had restrained me, I had scratched him or something.
Yeah.
So he made it seem as if I had injured a staff member, right? That sounds a lot more serious than what it was. And then on top of that, like, the reason that supposedly happened was his fault, you know, like, anyway. So yeah, no, I kind of did know. My mom sent me a letter and said, you better shape up or they're going to send you to High Impact. And she explained it like a wilderness program. You're going to be out there, you're going to be living in a tent, you're going to be cooking your own meals, and it's going to, and I think that's other
things, which is a completely other kind of program. So that's kind of ironic that she said, oh, it's like this, you know, like, it's almost like she was told to say that or something.
Well, yeah, no, like I said, I don't think she saw the compound. I don't think she visited High Impact. I don't think she really knew what it was, because it wasn't a wilderness program.
Yeah, because I went to wilderness, I know. Yeah,
it wasn't like that. We weren't hiking. We never left the facility. We were just walking in circles and sitting in stress positions. That was the entirety. Like, we didn't do school. We didn't do anything besides, I mean, we were just screamed at constantly. Like, I feel like that's something that I haven't even really like touched on all that much, of like how psychologically jarring it is to be screamed at constantly. Like, that was the staff's job, essentially, was to be in our face and scream. I mean, I don't know if they were obscenities. A lot of it was in Spanish. But you know, realistically, they were verbally, physically, and psychologically torturing us. That was the entire point.
Trying to break you.
Right. That was the entire point. so that it was like, when I got back to the facility, I would shape up so that I would never go back to high impact. But I mean, there were girls that were sent there twice, and they were sent there for no other reason than like let's punish this person so that other people, like, make them an example so that other people will be too scared to, you know, to act out or to question, and will get right on board with the program, because they don't want to end up like Chelsea. They don't want to end up like these other kids that were sent not once but twice and came back like completely dirty and emaciated and broken and infected. And you know, like, my hair was so matted because I have really long, like, strong hair. And since our hygiene was just not very good and we were not like allowed to like brush our hair at all, I came back with dreadlocks. And since I couldn't like brush it out, they just cut my hair. They just cut all of my hair, really long hair I'd grown for years. They just cut it because it was so far gone. Like, that's how bad our hygiene was. And I can tell you that I've heard multiple people describe seeing me coming back to the facility as traumatic for them. That's the point of it. They're really trying to use fear and intimidation by punishing some children so that the other children will, you know, stay in line. But yeah, no, I mean, my mom did tell me I was going to go, and but I don't think that she really understood what was going to happen to me. And then I think that she was coached not to believe me when I told her what happened to me. I told her to her face when I saw her, forget if it was at a seminar. No, it was at a doctor's appointment. I somehow manipulated my way into going on a doctor's appointment with my mom there, right? So that I could tell her what happened and that I want to go home. This was after 2 years. I hadn't had so much as a phone call with my mom. I had letters, but I never actually got to speak to her, see her or anything. So I told her to her face that they held us in dog cages. Like, I was starved. I was beaten. I was burned. They almost killed me out there. Like, I have a chronic spinal injury now because of the restraint in high impact. And she didn't believe me. And she told me afterwards that the staff had already encouraged her not to believe me if I had said anything like I was being abused. But I mean, I still, you know, it doesn't fly for me, because if I was in her position, if somebody told me, oh, don't believe them, they're going to say that I abused them. I'd be smart enough to know that it's probably true, and that's what abusers say when they're abusing people. Don't believe them, you know.
Believe them more, probably. I'd be more inclined to believe them more, you know.
Exactly. Yeah. And you know, I sent letters home too. I sent a letter. In fact, I have the letter saying that, you know, like, they're beating us, like, they're holding us in dog cages, like, they're starving me. I'm so hungry. Like, please help. Like, and I did get into a lot of trouble for sending that letter. In fact, that was the incident in which I was almost killed. The staff member came out, held the letter to my face and said, how dare you manipulate like this, you know, using the word abuse. And I'm like, well, you know, is what it is. And he
send the letter. Did they even send the letter out, or did they just?
Okay. They did. Wow. My mom got it. Yeah, my mom had it. Yeah. Well, that's what blows my mind. But you know, he came out and he confronted me and he restrained me, and then we were doing laundry, and he dumped the bucket of laundry on top of my head and then held my head down into the mud. And I mean, I probably suffocated or something, because I mean, I don't remember anything after that. All I remember is coming back to consciousness, and there were all these people around me freaking out like they had killed somebody. So yeah, I mean, like, I could have just been another one named on that list of kids that died in these programs. So, you know, that's what's so scary here, is that the same people that are that ran programs back then and are still running programs now here in the US.
Yeah, it's fucked up. Were either of you there for when people died in the program? I know Jenna, weren't you there when fucking no?
That was after me, but I was there when the girl died in Jamaica. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't my facility, but I know how they handled it. So,
What happened to that one?
Charlie Newman was the one.
Yeah, Newman was the one at Spring Creek, yeah. But what happened with the one in Tranquility Bay or whatever, Jamaica? What did you hear about that?
I think she was in worksheets or their version of isolation. What was it called? OP. OP, yeah. So she was in either worksheets or OP, and she asked for something, I don't know what, and then they said no or whatever, and she ran and jumped off a balcony. I don't know if it's out of a window. I've heard, you know, this is from survivors that were there, so I'm sure it's.
Well, it was definitely like a.
That's the one that fell out of the window?
Balcony. She swan dived off of the balcony, is what I've been told. And there's a lot of survivors that had witnessed it, and you know, even in the aftermath, like the huge blood stains on the concrete outside, and they still made them like line up on her blood without having.
They made them clean it. They made the survivors clean it up. And I read through the court transcripts of everything that happened to Valerie leading up to her death. And it's exactly what happened at Spring Creek. She was on the rock challenge. Like, they had definitely identified her as being problematic. And she was emailing her mom, or not emailing, mailing, saying, this place isn't helping me. I'm getting really depressed. Please come help me. I need real help. Like, I can't do this. And they just kept throwing her in the Hobbit. They'd put her on a challenge. I mean, it was nonstop. I feel like she was driven to suicide. Like, the human spirit can only take so much.
Yeah. I mean, that's happened to a lot of kids in these programs. They've just been either on the, there was a kid in another program that was on suicide watch for like 2 weeks. And then as soon as he got off of suicide watch, and I don't even know how this happens, there's like usually staff members watching you 24/7, but he was able to walk away from the group, from the family, go into the showers and hang himself from the showers. And, you know, I think that really points to the process that they use for suicide watch in general. Like, it's not therapeutic. It's more of a punishment in and of itself. They're like strip searching you constantly, and they're not letting you speak to other people, and they're using the attack therapy and like, what's wrong with you? Stop acting out, stop manipulating, things like that. And I could see how that would lead you to want to do it even more, you know, from that perspective. And we also know that from the court documents from Carly Newman, that she had a diary where she was writing about all of her experiences and how it was very depressing, and she was suicidal, and I think that that's ultimately what led to this being a wrongful death, is that had she not been held in this program and put through what she was put through, she probably wouldn't have been suicidal. Depressed maybe, but had she gotten real treatment instead of this, she would still be alive today.
For sure. Okay, well, I wanted to transition over into when you guys got out of the program. What kind of things have you struggled with the most? Like, for me, I'm always waiting for the other shoe to drop. Really hard to trust people. And another thing I'm been struggling with a lot lately too is when do I, and I was making jokes about this in the last episode about how I might want to become a stand-up comic about how, because of all the trauma I went through in fucking boarding school. I mean, I feel like I can make some jokes about all this fucked off shit that I went through. But one of the things was just, fuck, what was I gonna say? Okay, I'm talking about the jokes. Fuck, it'll come back to me in a second. But I was okay. Now I'm getting a
After the program.
Yeah, after the program, but I'm getting like a reflection of the sound on my end. Are you guys hearing a reflection, or not a reflection, but a? Okay, there's like an echo thing going on my end. Okay, there it goes. It stopped again. That's so weird. Okay,
I
but
do hear your fan. I think it's your fan. Yeah.
Okay. But we were making jokes the other day about how, like, when I start talking to somebody new, I remember now. Start talking to somebody new, for example, when do I even bring up the trauma that I've been through? Do I bring it up at all? Do I bring it up at the beginning so we can talk about it and work through it right away? Like, when do I even bring that up? Like, for an example of like a joke that I could tell people, like, I don't even know how to fucking talk to people anymore because do I even tell them about the shit I've been through? Because like when I tell them, it's like, is it too much? Because I know it is too much. I know it's too much. I know it's overwhelming. And it's like, but then I have that and then a bunch of other trauma that I have in my life. So like, do I even tell people about this? Like, and I feel like there could be like a lot more things people could like. I feel like some people that have been through this, the boarding schools should become stand-up comics. I might even do some stand-up comedy about like, you know, because like a lot of people that do comedy, if you notice, like a lot of them have come from like a traumatic like past. They didn't have the best like life growing up, and so they're able to take that and make jokes, like humor from it. So I don't know, we were joking about that, about how do I even talk to people and how do I relate to people. So yeah, that's one of the things I struggle with a lot, always waiting for the other shoe to drop. How do I even talk to people about my trauma that I've been through? Trust issues, definitely addiction. I struggled with addiction for a long time. I think a big part of the addiction for me was the big warm blanket feeling that I got from it, and just like, it just like, I didn't want to deal with my trauma. And so I would rather avoid and just have that warm blanket feeling. And so I did hard drugs for a long time. And I have, for the people that don't know, I have 17 plus months on just weed. So I'm doing what I can to stay off of that. But yeah, so yeah, what are you guys' triggers? What has been hard for you after you got out? What's like the hardest things you struggle with? And how do you like go about managing those things?
Well, I gotta say, the question that I always got that was hard to answer when I was younger anyway was, oh, where'd you go to high school?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I didn't. You know, like, how do you explain that? And I think that it is kind of hard to sum it up in a way that people like will immediately understand, because I mean, what is this experience relatable to? I mean, we can say it was kind of like a prison. We could say it's kind of like a boarding school. We could say it's kind of like a mental health institute, or I mean, psychiatric facility, but it's not any of those things. If you would say behavior modification program, they'd kind of just like, what? Like, we don't even know what that is, you know? It's not common knowledge. So it is kind of hard to explain that to people so that they immediately get it. But I mean, I do feel like it is more at the forefront now than it's ever been before. I mean, you see it in a lot of like movies and shows, and I mean, now the news with Paris Hilton and her documentary, and, you know, other documentaries coming out. So I think it is going to be a lot easier for us to start and have those conversations once this does become more public knowledge. But realistically, it's us having those conversations that leads to more public awareness. So I know you say, like, how should I even have this conversation? And the answer is yes, absolutely. I mean, especially as somebody you care about, because if they're going to take the time to listen to you and understand you and understand what you went through, they're going to be able to learn how to communicate that to others. And let's say they have, you know, a niece or a nephew that's about to get sent to one of these places, they can talk to their family and they can say, hey, wait a second, think about this, because I know somebody that went through this and they're fucked up now, you know, like, so we do become like that cautionary tale. And I know it is kind of hard to talk about it sometimes, but it makes a difference, because I mean, literally, like, you could save a life. You could save a life by using your voice. And I love that saying, like, speak even though your voice shakes. You know,
Yeah.
we're channeling this pain, this trauma into progress. We're saving others by speaking our truth. So yeah, I know, I do think that is something that I struggled with, of like, how to even put this into words, you know,
Yeah.
like, you're gonna need like a 6-part series Game of Thrones style saga, in order to you know, really explain what happened here. But I think that that's exactly what we're doing. All these podcasts, all of these documentaries, all of the, you know, all of the awareness efforts that we're putting out there is getting it very much closer to the point where the troubled teen industry is going to be a household name, and it is going to be just automatically, you know, it is not a good look to send your kids to one of these places. And ultimately, that's what we've wanted that's what I've been fighting for the last 20 years, is just to like make it known to people that these places are abusive. And if you send your kid to these places, you are risking them coming back worse or not at all.
And you're signing away your rights too. That's what a lot of parents don't understand either, is that when you sign that paper, most people, like, unfortunately, don't even read the fine print of a lot of these papers. And like, in the fine print, you are signing away your rights. There is no essentially that you are signing away your rights.
Well, you're signing your kids' rights too, and you're literally saying it's okay to restrain them or use whatever physical means necessary to control them. And if they die or get injured, you're not going to hold us responsible. Like, that's literally what's in that fine print.
Yeah. And these contracts are not legal. First of all, you can't sign away your rights like that. That's not how it works. You have to actually go to court. The kid's going to say it's much more complicated than that. And what this industry is great at is creating loopholes of confusion. So jurisdiction is so messy. People are like, well, I don't know, and just go along with it, you know? But like, a lot of survivors, their families or them were forced to sign NDAs. Those aren't real. Like, those are not enforceable. First of all, your parents can't sign a contract for you. And second of all, those aren't enforceable. So, I mean, I don't think we should be afraid of the stuff. Like, a lot of people, I see this as got conned and duped. This is like the scam of the century. But the more we talk about it, the more it makes it so those scams aren't possible. Like, I have been telling my story pretty publicly for about 4 years now. And I would say that most people know that I went to a program. They pretty much know what I'm about. But I get a lot of phone calls from scared parents where they're like, my kid either got in trouble with the law or did this or that. I don't know what to do. And I'm glad. That is why I continue to tell my story. Of course, I love when the survivors reach out and connect and we can validate. But really, the parents that are looking at this as an option, that's who I'm interested in speaking to. Because this traumatizes people. Like, I don't know, people will say, oh, I'm grateful for the program because it saved my life because I was on a bad path. And it's like, okay, it removed you from the environment. But does anybody feel like that therapy actually helped them? Do these people that saying that have like strong self-esteem, or are they in like toxic patterns in their life ever since there because they have this feeling of not worthy? Like, you see this common thing among survivors, and I think that's because this experience isn't recognized. People don't understand it. It takes a lot of discussion to really paint a picture of what happens. There's not an appropriate label for it at this point. And I think that needs to change. I think we can cancel it. Now being a parent, I don't know any parents that would sign up for this. None of them. So.
Right. But that's also because you've done a lot of advocacy work just in your personal life, like talking to all the parents on the street, making sure that, they know that they can come to you and talk to you if they were ever considering anything like that. And you would definitely talk them out of it. So, yeah. Another thing you mentioned, and I'd like for us to touch on things that survivors regularly struggle with, is symptoms of complex PTSD. Now, that's not my area of expertise. In fact, Jenna, I'd like you to take this one. But I really do feel like this is something that all of us have in common in a really astonishing number of people have the very same symptoms. And I know you mentioned the not knowing when the next shoe is going to drop, right? Like that to me screams anxiety. And that's just generalized anxiety where you don't even know where it's coming from, but you're conditioned to feel that way. That is, that's how your brain has learned to survive, is to be hypervigilant at all times. And that's very unhealthy because that keeps your body physically in a heightened state of Jenna, help me out here. What's the medical term for
fight or
fight or flight, freeze, fawn, and then rest. And the way I had it explained to me is if you put fight or flight over here and freeze fawn over here, and then your rest in the middle, a normal person is going to swing back and forth and keep moving through these various cycles. And that's how we process information. But you take a child whose brain is developing, and then you put them in a situation where there's a threat everywhere. I would get paranoid about forgetting my water bottle. I would have to find little hacks to try to remind myself because I had to be so overly accountable there. And I think that when you've trained your brain for that, and I think the science supports this, that instead of flowing naturally back and forth, what it can do is you become an outlier where you get stuck in these states. And then that's where you see the body not process through any system correctly. And you start to get hung up. You start to see autoimmune disorders. If you polled our community and saw how many autoimmune disorders there were, you'd be astonished. And ACE's training went into this, where they said, if you have these certain factors, it is going to set you up for more long-term health problems. It's going to set you up for all these things. If survivors took that ACEs quiz, I guarantee you're going to be seeing really high numbers because it's mainly centered around abuse. And it basically converts your body from how it's supposed to work into this continuous fight or flight state, which makes everything dysfunction. So the trauma therapy is the best thing that's out there for that, and then identifying triggers is how you treat that. But how do you identify triggers when there was a consequence for everything,
And then this fear of therapy, how do we even say, look, I need help with this. I'm struggling because of the therapy that I went through. And now I need therapy to unlearn and process the damage from the last therapy that I got. I can understand why most survivors would be afraid of that. And I mean, we already, as a society, have a reluctance of resistance to seeking help when we need it. And I mean, a lot of that is image and pride and ego and wanting to look like you've got all your shit together and needing to look like you've got all your shit together because, we're all expected to do that in order to, operate in a civilized society, I guess, and keep a job and, maintain a reputation. But realistically, we could, every human on earth could use therapy, real therapy, trauma based. I don't know if you've ever heard of EMDR, but like
I've actually started some EMDR. Unfortunately, I actually had a doctor quit. I literally, okay, so you know how, if you know anything about EMDR, you're not supposed to start it and then stop it. You're supposed to start it and then deal with all this shit. But she literally started it and then she's like, oh, I can't see you anymore.
Yeah, well, that's kind of dangerous. Similar to what we went through in the program, actually, where like the process of breaking you down to build you back up, you know, if you're just in the breakdown mode, then you could get stuck there. So yeah, I highly suggest, you know, looking into continuing whatever you can to get yourself through. I mean, it's a process. It really is. It takes years and years. There's no easy, quick fix. And I mean, for most of us, I would say all of us, but not to just be totally pessimistic, but there really isn't a cure for what we have. You know, it's more along the lines of like, how do we find resources and coping skills and tools. And obviously, I think one of the biggest tools that we've tried to develop throughout the years is just our community, like being able to know that you've got somebody to call, you've got somebody that got you. You know, I think that that's probably the most important thing, that is to have somebody that knows what you went through. And that's what I think our community is about. And like, we just kind of like get it, you know, like when you say, you know, I'm triggered by this, and listen, if I told another survivor, look, I'm real triggered because somebody's using Fabuloso, you know, they'd get it, because that was the cleaner that we used at Casa to, you know, mop the floors. And it probably sends all of us into a triggered PTSD state, because one, it stinks, and two, it just brings everything back. We smelled it every single day. That is what all of our you know, like the houses and the Commodore and everything, it smelled exactly like that. So it's kind of hard to explain to other people, but it's really, you can instantly get understanding with other survivors. And that's why I'm glad that you're doing these podcasts. It really does help us to connect and to share and to you know, to validate each other. So that's really cool. This is really cool. Thank you for doing it.
Yeah, no problem. And I also wanted to say, one of the how I've been dealing with helping myself recently is like, I just listen to my body. I try and just listen to, like, when I'm feeling a certain way. Like if I'm feeling depressed, I'm trying to get into the routine of I just like close my eyes and be like, where do I feel depressed? Where do I feel that? Okay, I feel it down here. What does it feel like? What does it look like? Does it look like anything? And then I try and just like picture that where it is. And like by doing that and listening to your body, it's like a voice inside that's finally being heard. It's trying so hard to get your attention. It's been trying for years to get your attention, and you keep on just pushing it back, using drugs, putting a needle in my arm, whatever the fuck it was, instead of dealing with that shit. And it's constantly trying to get your attention. It's like, just pay attention to me, just like hear me out. Like, and so if you finally just like, okay, I'm gonna close my eyes, I'm gonna give you that voice, I'm gonna let you be heard, that's like where changes start to happen in your body. Like, this is scientifically proven science behind this. Like, so I just try and listen to my body. And like, it's really hard to get into the routine of doing that though, because when I'm feeling and shit, I have these instant like urges to just, and it's just like instant autopilot, just no, I have to push that back down. I can't feel like that. I can't cry. I can't allow myself to cry because, you know, maybe I have a roommate or whatever the fuck, like whatever my excuse is for not feeling that and just giving it a voice, it just automatically, an excuse comes over it. And so I'm just trying to reprogram my brain to like, no, I'm going to sit here and listen to it. And the other day I was feeling super depressed. I was starting to feel a little bit suicidal, and I was like, fuck this. I'm just going to close my eyes and just be like, okay, where's this coming? Like, where do I feel it? And I actually had a buddy. I actually have a video up of me doing that process of focusing and listening to my body with the person that actually first introduced me to the concept of focusing, which is essentially just listening to your body and giving that voice within that's been trying to get your attention a voice and letting it be heard, and doing that day to day. Whenever you feel something, whenever you feel sad, whenever you feel depressed, any kind of emotion, just close your eyes and like listen to it, because it's there for a reason. Like, and it could be, you know, maybe it's something, some trauma you didn't even know you had, but just like when you were younger, you know, you tried to show something as small in your mind as like, hey daddy, look at the picture I just drew. Oh no, I don't have time for that, let me watch my show. Something like as little as that can have a huge devastating effect. Okay, my dad doesn't care enough to give me attention, or look at something that I'd spent all these hours to draw, or whatever it is. Like, it could be something as little as that, or it could be something, you know, super dramatic, like when I was raped at 7, you know, like. And so there's all these things that like I've been trying to push down and avoid with drugs and all that stuff, that I'm just trying to learn to listen to my body and just be present with it, and just realize it's there for a reason, and I'm not bad. I'm not a bad person because I have these thoughts. Like, for example, like every now and then I'll get a thought like, oh, I just, you know, I want to just scream at that dude, just out of nowhere. Like, you ever get those thoughts where it's just like, you never do it, but like, just a thought comes into your mind, like, do that guy's so annoying right now, I just want to scream at him to shut up or something. You just get like, I don't know, I get these urges every now and then to just like, oh, I just want to strangle him or something. But like, not that I'd actually strangle him, but like, but listening to that is important. Okay, but it doesn't mean you have to do it. It doesn't make you a bad person that you have these random thoughts that come into your mind. I call them intrusive thoughts, you know. It doesn't make you a bad person. You're not a bad person because you have these thoughts every now and then. When you act on them, your actions are what defines you as a good or bad person, in my opinion. So it's like, just listen to your body. Like, realize that, you know, maybe that could be frustration from when you were a child and you couldn't get your parents' attention. That could be it manifesting itself like that. You never know where emotions are actually coming from unless you listen to your body and try and figure that out. So I've been trying to just, you know, like work with myself and like just listen to my body until I can find somebody else to do the EMDR. And maybe by then, you know, I won't even need somebody to do EMDR. Maybe by then I'll have been able to train my body to. Because the person that I learned focusing from, he naturally does this. He's taught himself how to naturally just focus, listen to his body. Every single time he has tension or whatever, he'll just close his eyes, listen to his body, and it's changed his life. So I'm trying to train myself how to do that. And especially when I do these podcasts, a lot, since I'm an empath, you know, I feel this shit. Like I put myself in that exact place, and I like, it gets multiplied by a factor of how much. And so especially after I do these podcasts, I just, you know, I need to decompress. I need time to decompress and like give myself time to breathe, because I already deal with a lot more stress, and then on top of that, dealing with their trauma. So it's really important to listen to your body.
It is. Meditation is probably one of the most helpful, holistic things that anybody can do for themselves, especially when it comes to coping with anxiety. You know, breath work, also paying attention to your senses. There's this exercise I like to do that's essentially you call out each one of your senses. You know, maybe starting with sight. Give me 4 things that I can see right now, here in the present time. And then so I look and I see there's a beautiful purple flower over there. I love that. There's a bluebird over there in that tree. I love that. You know, so
Grounding yourself. Yeah.
Exactly. A couple things you can see. Now start, what can you hear? What do you hear outside? It's just about like being present in the moment and listening to your body. Exactly. Like your body is your connection to the world. So, you know, making time for that, providing space for that for yourself, helps you to, you know, kind of like reset, especially if you're in that fight or flight moment, maybe even like going into a panic attack, using these kinds of techniques where you're grounding yourself and you're putting yourself in the present, and you know, you're focusing on breathing, and you're actually telling yourself, I'm not going to think about anything right now except my body, what myself right here, right now. And that can help you to kind of like snap out of it, relax, and then get into a better position where you can go back to what you were trying to figure out, and figure it out from a place of more calm. And I know that is something that I think a lot of survivors struggle with, just anxiety in general, but also having these panic attacks. I know that like when I lived in San Diego, I was pretty close to Mexico, you know, right there on the border. And I could swear that I would be able to see the man who abused me, that he would be there. He would be walking down the street right next to me, you know, and that was an irrational fear, but it's something that I struggled with for a really long time, I guess, until I moved out of San Diego. And now that doesn't feel like much of a fear. But, you know, there have been times where like I wanted to avoid even like going anywhere because for that reason and that reason alone, you know, I didn't want to run into anybody, and that fear of people and the fear of crowds. I mean, it's like being afraid of sharks at the deep end of the pool. Like, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen, but it is a legitimate fear. You feel it in your body, you feel it in your chest, and recognizing that and asking where that comes from and working through that is, I mean, realistically, that's all we can do, is learn those kinds of coping skills to get ourselves through it. And then obviously, you know, have a survivor on speed dial, you know, have somebody that you know, you love, you trust, you can call and you can tell them what you're going through, and they get it because they go through the same thing, and help you walk through it and remind you what an awesome person you are, how strong you are. You've been through this, or you've been through worse. You can get through this, you know. I think that, you know, it's really important that we have this community, because there's like really nobody else on earth that's actually gonna get what we're going through, these little intricate triggers that we have and what we struggle with, other than us.
And I just want to say one more thing, like we're as human beings, we're meant to be fluid. Like our emotions and feelings are meant to be fluid and flowing. And when they're not fluid and flowing, and we start to like put it, you know, for example, using drugs, that puts a fucking stake right in the road. It's no longer fluid and flowing. It's stopped. Just similar to when people are traumatized as children. Like, for example, when I was raped at 7, you freeze at that age, essentially. You freeze at that age, like in your mind, you freeze because you go into that fight or flight, and you need to work through that in order to grow up out of your mind, to grow out of that trauma that you, so yeah, that's really important. But yeah, so I hadn't heard. So Jen, what are some things you struggled with? And then how have you been dealing with them?
Well, when I first got out of the program, I was an avoider for sure. I was out on my own at 17 and pretty much a party girl. I was really interested in my friends and having fun, and that's about it. And I just didn't care. It was like I didn't care what happened to me at all. I was like, I've been oppressed. Nobody gets it. Everybody keeps telling me I was at some boarding school, so I'm going to go have fun now. And I was angry, and nightmares were like a really big thing. And I didn't even know what PTSD was, but I was pretty like quick-tempered. And then I had my kids. And so I kind of grew up, went on with my life. It was just something in my past, until a few years ago when I saw what was going down in Montana. It like triggered me big time, because I was able to move forward because I thought that it was shut down. I was like, okay, I went to this place, it was horrible. it got shut down. It's not a thing anymore. They don't do that anymore. And I was able to move on with my life. And then when I found out that that wasn't true, oh man, I was so upset. And then I started speaking to the survivors that were testifying against my old therapist and my old program director. And they were telling me the things that they had recently done. And I felt so much guilt. Like, I should have done something sooner. I could have prevented this. And then that energy is pretty much what drove me into advocacy, because when I think I had oppressed it for so long that when expression finally came, it was like big energy and I needed to do something big about this. I was like ready to change something.
Yeah. I remember you were definitely on the warpath. You know, something you said I wanted to comment on, nightmares and insomnia.
Oh, yeah.
Big thing for me. In fact, I feel like that's why I got into this, is because I was struggling so much with nightmares and insomnia. The anger. I mean, I would literally just relive my experience in high impact like every night before going to bed, if I could get to bed. And I was on sleep medication to try to like get me to sleep at night. And then I would be just like a complete wreck during the day. And it really affected my whole life. So I can honestly say that now that I've, gotten into advocacy and processed a lot of this, I don't really have program nightmares. Very rarely do I have program nightmares. I can only really credit that the change has been my advocacy. Like, I feel like I'm doing something with that energy. I'm not just trapping it in my body,
For sure. Let's see. I wanted to say that was another thing I was going to point out is the nightmares for sure. What I struggle with is I wake up like every 15 minutes throughout the night. Like I can't sleep through the night unless I take a pill. Like, which is really, it's pretty fucked up because like literally I don't like taking sleeping pills because then it makes me groggy the next day. But then I'll wake up every 15 minutes through the night and it's just like, can I just get like a real night's sleep? I never feel like completely rested. And then definitely night tremors. I used to literally have to tell any friend that I would sleep over at their house or whatnot, or that I would sleep there or whatnot. I'd be like, look, if I'm going to do this, if I'm going to be here, you have to know that in the middle of the night, I'm probably going to wake up screaming and covered in sweat. And you're probably going to, but I say, but don't touch me because I might punch you or something. Like I have literally I don't know what I'm doing and I'm out of it when I'm having a night tremor. And so I dealt with that for a long time. Night tremors was a huge thing for me. And I still kind of get them every now and then, but it's gotten better now that I've started listening to my body. During like your advocacy, both of you, like what's the craziest thing you guys have found out? Yeah, what's the craziest thing you guys have found out? What is and then on the other end of that, what's the best thing that you guys have been able to come up from the advocacy?
I didn't hear part 2 of that question.
Okay, I think every time that I hear that noise, I think I go mute. So I don't know what's going on. I don't have my fan on anymore, but something, I don't know. They don't want us talking about this, obviously, or something like that. But so I was saying, damn it, now I forgot what I was saying. Okay, I was talking about the nightmares. What was the last thing you guys heard me say?
I heard you say, what's the craziest thing we found out during our advocacy? And what's like the best thing that's come out of this, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, yeah, that was the question for you guys both. Yeah. What have you guys like found out about?
Well, I could definitely say there's been a lot. I mean, a lot of sexual abuse, to the point that like I have kind of a theory, call it a conspiracy theory, that I think that W.W.A.S.P was kind of like a sex ring, like a pedo sex ring. Just because there are so many administrators and staff members that have been accused and or found guilty. I don't think enough of them have been found guilty. Obviously, we've only really, I guess best example would be Ben Train from Midwest Academy, got 9 years in prison. But I mean, realistically, we've had like hundreds of people come forward and say that they were sexually assaulted. And then a lot of these staff members would use their position as, an authoritarian or being able to provide points or privileges or things like that in order to initiate what they claim to be consensual sexual relationships. I think there were a lot of those, and I think that had a lot to do with how the program was set up, and that's what makes me think that it was like systemic. Like that was kind of the point. Like these programs are like just breeding grounds, and it makes it so easy for a pedophile to be able to groom their victims. Well, you'd actually be able to find out exactly what their family life is like. Mm-hmm. That you'd be able to, by picking favorites and giving them like little privileges here and there, a little bit of extra attention, get them to, do whatever you want them to do and not tell anybody. You would be able to threaten them, intimidate them. You'd be able to, tell their parents not to believe them, and then they wouldn't. So, I mean, it's the perfect place for a pedophile to find and abuse their victims. And, I tend to think that, I don't think it's that shocking, but it's definitely, very prevalent in these programs. And as far as the best thing, I just say, like, in the last couple of years, I have just loved seeing this issue explode. There's so many more advocates that are like dedicated and doing good work, new podcasts, new, awareness campaigns, new groups, more people putting pressure on their legislators. I said this many years ago, and I think it still rings true. Like, these programs created their own army against them, like they created us. Did they really think we weren't going to be pissed enough to organize and take them down? Like, no, I'm really proud of our community and how we've been able to, take such a terrible experience and turn it into, a reason to not only be strong for ourselves and for each other, but to help the kids that are in there now. Like, maybe there's nothing we can do about what happened to us, but we can definitely do something for them. And that's why changing the laws and bringing more awareness so that it's literally a public, household name, and making it a lot harder for these programs to get away with what they're doing. There's just going to be a lot less cases of children coming out and being as damaged as we are. And I really want to actually quote Miranda from Troubled. She started this. It's a hashtag called No More Survivors. And I love it. It's perfect. This is what we're going for. That's the vision, right? That's the goal, is that we will have worked to the point where no one else is going to come out. No more generations of kids are going to come out of this program and identify as survivors of this industry. And I think the way to do that is to defund the troubled teen industry and to really just reform the mental health industry and the best practices in mental health. And obviously, we want to make sure that there's going to be those kinds of services available for kids and families in every state so that they can access those kinds of services that obviously don't create survivors, and there won't be any need for kids to be sent to these kinds of abusive programs just for punishment, and creating more survivors. So yeah, hashtag no more survivors. I think that's the best thing that's come out of all of this.
Okay, what about you, Jenna?
I don't think there's one thing. My life has definitely gotten a lot more exciting and interesting since doing this work. And I thought that I had seen it all until you do this work. I can say that just based on tips and stuff, we've had to contact all areas of law enforcement and file complaints. Like, for me, it's the blatancy of like how egregious these crimes are and that they continue to get away with it. It just blows. I mean, that's the thing. I'm like, I mean, one of these people ran for a, presidential candidate and stuff. Like, it's just wild to me that this has continued on and like it hasn't been stopped after all these years and all these survivors. And so, yeah, that's probably the craziest part. I mean, definitely the crimes. These people are commit the craziest crimes that you will ever think of. I'm specifically Narvin Litchfield. He's probably my like favorite program owner to pick on because he's just so blatant with his stuff. It's wild. The best thing, it's the same. It's like I had a Masters Ranch. Some of those survivors reached out the other day and say how much that they have felt supported by the work that we have been able to help them with. I've had parents that pulled their kids from that particular program message and say like, I had no idea, thank you. I guess it's the kids saved. Each one of those, and it's not just one. It happens frequently when you're doing this work. Parents contact you a lot. A lot of parents have pulled their kids. I think a lot of healing has come out of this. And I know my family is very fractured from the program. Very, very fractured. I don't know if there's any going back, really. I know that that's a common theme because of how they structured things. And I hope, like, my next big, wild, crazy goal is to give closure to all these families. Like, I want to validate the survivor. I want the parents to realize that those seminars they thought were weird, yeah, they were weird, and that they were conned. And then I want families to be able to heal some of that divide, because I think that's what keeps this like sick roll in place with survivors and this perpetual cycle of misunderstanding and disconnection.
Right.
For sure. Have you guys forgiven your parents? How's your relationship with you guys as parents?
I forgive my mom, and she has done the work. Like, if I send her an article, or if I'm working on a project or a movement or something, she's reading everything. She's liking it. She's sharing it. She's very involved in her church. She's like talking about the religious programs to her congregation. Like, I love it. I could not ask for anything more as far as support of saying, hey, I messed up. I am sorry. What can we do now? My dad and stepmom, they like to double down. Their famous line is, you didn't die. And I think that I deserved more than that. I'm still very resentful that I'm the one that was sent. I could get over it if they could acknowledge that I was not in fact broken and that was a bad choice. Then I feel like we could move past it, but they won't acknowledge it. They double down on that choice all day long. When I told them that I was wanting to come out with my story and my photo, they told me I was conning the nation. So it doesn't matter that you can Google W.W.A.S.P. You can Google all these places, and I'm still a liar. So
that's understandable. How about you?
Yeah, my mom and I have a much better relationship. I think it definitely took years. I mean, it took years for us to even really talk about it. And I know that she did for quite a while. And I know a lot of parents have that like automatic knee-jerk reaction to be defensive about their decision. It's like
Especially when there's a lot of money involved, especially when they invested a lot of money.
Right. Yeah. No, for sure. I mean, a lot of parents like sold their house or took out a second mortgage or like literally still paying off the program. Yeah. But you know, I think that it's also kind of up to us on like how we explain it, you know, because it took me a long time and a lot of research myself to understand this issue so that I could communicate it in a way that my mom would hear me and not feel defensive. And part of that is like, hey, mom, you were conned too. You are a victim too. We're in this together. We're not on the opposite sides. I'm not blaming you. What I'm saying is this is what happened. This is the system that was set up, and sorry, but you kind of fell for it, you know, and I was damaged. And my job now is to make sure that other kids aren't going to go through the same thing. And I think she respects that, like coming from that point of view. It's like, look, how do we fix this, you know? And we also had to fix our relationship too, the trust, you know, like sometimes it is hard to, I mean, my mom's the type of person that just loves to give advice, you know what I mean? And she'll get offended if you don't take her advice. But, you know, and sometimes it's hard to trust when other people want to make decisions for you, and maybe their decisions for you in the past were not great. So those are the things that we've been working on. Obviously, you know, I've had to draw some boundaries and she's had to learn how to respect that. But I think that's kind of with a lot of families when a child becomes an adult. It is kind of like a process for them to realize what that means. So, yeah, I will say that we have a good relationship. I'm not mad at my mom. But I do think that there's always going to be that like conversation or like that instant knee-jerk reaction to be defensive when we bring up this issue with parents. I mean, not even just our parents, like all parents. That like, well, they were a really bad kid. I didn't know what else to do. I did not have the tools. I did not have the time. I was working. Like my mom, she was a single mom. She did not have time. And I like get that now as an adult, like how it's hard to juggle everything. And especially if your kid is, you know, having mental health problems in school, this, that, or the other thing, you're going to want to reach out for help. It's just, I mean, the only way that she really failed in that is that she kind of fell for this marketing, and what they sold to her was a product that they did not deliver, right? So being able to communicate that in that way to her has helped us to redevelop our relationship with more trust, because I'm not blaming her outright for like abusing me, right? Yeah. But that in and of itself takes time because we have to work on our anger. I had a ton of resentment towards my mom. She was really involved with the seminars, like really involved, like staffing seminars all the time. So she had to, you know, unlearn a lot. She had to deprogramize. And I had my own path, and then eventually we did come back together. So I do think that there's hope for survivors to be able to, you know, repair those relationships with their parents, but it really is like a two-way street. It can't just be the kid, and it can't just be the parent either. We both have to be willing to listen to each other and help each other process through the understanding of what actually happened here.
For sure. All right. If you guys could go back in a time machine and not go through that, would you?
I think I probably wouldn't, just to save myself the hassle, but on the other hand, I feel like I went through that for a reason, because I'm supposed to be here now, and I'm supposed to be helping others, and that's kind of like just part of like my purpose. And so yes and no. I mean, I guess no, because you know, if it's not us, who else? You know?
Yeah, for sure. What about you, Jenna?
Same. I do wish that I had either the normal or typical like high school experience or college experience. Like I wish I had one of those two things. But it is what it is. You know, I have made peace with the past as much as I think I'm going to. And for me, that was by finding purpose. Like I have a job now fighting for children. And that's what I always wanted to do. I just didn't know what my voice was going to be strong about. And now I found it. So.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I wanted to say, is there anything else you guys wanted to add to this?
Oh man, don't get us going. We will go for hours.
You can always, that's what I was gonna ask next. Is are you guys down to do a part 2? Eventually, I want to write some stuff down and like come up with some questions and stuff like that. But
yeah, I mean, we're
cool.
to talk about legislation. Like that's our bag. We really love to be able to, you know, maybe have another series just about that. Maybe even invite some other people and really have kind of like a round table, because I think the community itself needs to talk about federal legislation. Because there's actually quite a few federal bills out there right now that are addressing the general issue, not just the T.T.I, the, you know, mental health, juvenile justice, foster care, restraint and exclusion. And I think that we all have experiences that would, you know, obviously our voices should be heard on how these laws and this language need to be stated in a way to make things effective for the kids that are in there now. I know we struggle a little bit sometimes with effectiveness on a federal level for all bills, right? Because federal can really only do so much. They can't mandate the states to do anything. It's the states that have to take the federal bill as an example as to how they can pass even better state legislation. So it's always going to be like a really long-term strategy, right? And I think that us as a community need to come together and have that conversation and be on the same page with that strategy. So yeah, I would love to have another chance to talk about that. You know, Jenna and I run ICAPA, and it's a 501c4, which is a lobbyist. Like that's what we do. Legislation. I mean, we do other things, but we focus on legislation. So yeah, if you could have us back, we'd love to talk about that.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's plan on doing that. And I wanted to say before we close, there's a lot more cool stuff on this podcast coming in the future. I have in the future, just for people that don't know, if you know who Bad Baby is, her and her father want to come on my show, and like, so that there's that. And then there's like a couple more like people that are up there, like not necessarily famous, but like they're well known. They want to come on the show just like in the future. So there's a lot of stuff to look forward to on this podcast in the future. I can't believe that we're literally like, this will be the 42nd episode.
Wow.
I've done 42 of these with people, and then I've done 3 live streams by myself. And I think it's crazy that I do this by myself. It's fucking crazy. So I just do this by myself. It's crazy. I hope eventually that I have a team, but I see with the team thing, I'd want to make sure they were survivors, like, you know, that came from the same kind of, you know, because otherwise it's like, we're not really going to click, and like, I can't have you on my team if you didn't go through the same kind of shit type thing. Not that I'm discriminating against those people, that's fine, but I just feel like we'd understand each other better if it was survivor linked. Let me see here. And yeah, just like, don't be afraid to reach out to people if you guys are struggling. For real. You don't need to do this by yourself. We're in this together. And I also wanted to point out, I don't know exactly what went on with Breaking Code Silence and the other people or whatever. You guys are like butting heads. I've heard stories from both sides. It doesn't matter what actually happened with that. I just want to point out, we need to not be fighting with each other. We need to be coming together. Okay, this is like what the elites and the people that run our country in general want us to be fighting and at each other's heads. So when shit really pops off, and like, for example, if a nuke gets dropped, could happen any day now, just with what's going on in the world. I don't want to say much more than that, but I'm just saying, when shit actually does pop up, we're going to be so busy, they want us so busy ripping each other's head off that we won't have time to react. So we really just need to come together, okay? It doesn't matter. I understand that people have their differences and whatnot, and that's fine. You can have your differences and still be okay with a person and still be civil to them. You don't have to push the other person to your side of thinking. It's okay to agree to disagree. And that's one of the things I keep on trying to push on people is like, they don't have to believe the same things you believe. Just agree to disagree and that'll be cool. Just like, we need every last person we can get if we want to change laws. So I just wanted to point that out. Like,
well, I don't think that we're opposed to anybody. For the most part, we get along with everyone. I think that there's some people that want to cause division in our community, and we don't associate with those people. But other than that, like, I mean, even BCS, like, the organization, we're still cool and civil with them. In fact, I just helped them with their protest that they're doing this week. So, there's always room to grow and work together and, show a united front as a cohesive cause. And anybody that has that intention and wants to focus on the work, we're here for that.
For sure. And I wasn't pointing fingers at anybody in particular. I'm just saying overall, we need to just come together. We need as many people as we can get. And
I think the first time around when we really went full speed into this, there was not a lot of language regarding what a survivor is, the T.T.I. That was our intention, was to create this public awareness thing. But in any social movement, you're going to have a lot of different groups that form out of that. That voice eventually needs to not unify and to organize a little bit so you can get creation. So there's different ideas that come together instead of one mob. It's
kind of like a war fought on all fronts.
Yeah.
Right. And so after 2 years of pretty serious harassment in my personal life, I think that we have decided to just move forward under a new name because nothing is better than starting off fresh, and with a very pointed agenda where we know exactly what we have goals. And so we are working to get those goals done. Anybody that wants to work with us, great. Don't believe the rumors. I'm actually nice. Feel free to call me. And I'm very excited to move on into the future and the next phase, the next chapter of what once was a pretty successful social movement.
Right.
Sure, for sure.
No, I think Breaking Code Silence was very successful. Like, I mean, just being the rally cry, being this campaign that brought us all together and validated each other and gave us this, this outlet to express ourselves. And that concept still exists. The hashtag's still out there. This movement is still going, like, we're going strong. We've got really good public awareness. We're building on that. We're creating new films, documentaries, there's going to be a lot of good that's come from what BCS started, and naturally and with good intention bloomed and blossomed and grew from there. It was never going to be just one organization doing all the work. It can't be. And I'm so glad to see that there's so many other groups and, and advocates out there standing up for their specific issue. Like, for instance, you know, I've always been really focused on WASP, right? And started W.W.A.S.P survivors and created a survivor group, created the WASP survivors.com, pretty much a database of all of this information. And then when we started Breaking Code Silence, it was kind of like, what's next, right? What's next is the entire T.T.I. And so I like to see that growth. I like to see it move on. And I like to see, you know, maybe us old timers passing the baton to the new generation of advocates and just, you know, rooting them on, because, you know, I have the experience of a program 20 years ago where there's kids coming out now that have experience of what it's like now, and they're going to have a different voice, and they're going to have a different experience, and they're going to essentially, they're creating their own movement. Each one of these programs essentially has their own movement. And I just love to see that. I love to see that. I love to see survivors empowered to use their voice. And I'm really glad to and proud to know that that really started with Breaking Code Silence. It really inspired a lot of people. So yeah, no, there's really no hurt feelings or anything like that when it comes to Breaking Code Silence, because I still believe it's a really wonderful thing.
For sure, for sure. And I wanted to point out that I actually had somebody, when I was getting my methadone the other day down at the clinic, I had somebody completely random. I know she knows who I am, but she said, hey, she turned around and did double take. She's like, you do that podcast, don't you? And I was like, yeah, I do that podcast. And she's like, what's that about? And I'm like, I told her and all this shit. And I was like, well, the fact that you know, there's the algorithms and all of that, but I think finally maybe my podcast might be getting into the YouTube algorithm, which is fucking awesome. So I was like, that's awesome that's happening finally. That's awesome that you recognize me from that. That's awesome. And so there was that. And then also, I think it would be awesome to maybe not have a movie created, right? That would encompass, like, maybe even have it in like 3D or something, so people that, like, the public could experience what it was like to actually go to a school like that. Like, make a movie so, like, you do that encompasses every step of that process, like getting transported. Like, we could have one that, like, we could even have it like differ, like one where if you were transported, what it might be like, and one if you were brought up by your parents, what it might be like, and like physically for the public and like people that never went through something like this, and have actors that have never went through something like this performing that stuff, because I don't want to recreate that stuff, but I think it would be a good thing to recreate it, to show the public this is what it was like to be there, to go through it. Obviously, it's not going to be the same as actually going through it, but I feel like it would be good to, and especially with the seminars, like if we could get something to encompass what it felt like to be in a seminar, what it really was like that, to me would be groundbreaking.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it's so difficult to explain that stuff to somebody. Like,
right. Well,
know?
there are some books out here that I think do a pretty good job of explaining it. I mean, the book was really good, and in fact, a good friend of mine, Liz Iannelli, she's coming out with a book coming out soon. So, in fact, I think it's ICU Survivor is the title of it. So I would definitely look out for that. There are quite a few books and movies. Boot Camp, Cold Water, Over the GW, and Aaron Bacon. Those are all pretty good movies that do a decent job of kind of like visualizing and explaining what it's like to be in a program. But I think books get it down to like the detail. And I know that's something that I've been thinking about for a long time, is trying to write a book. I know a few of my friends who have written books. Alan Knoll wrote a book about his experience in the Bethel Boys Academy. Lily Spearbecker wrote a book about her experience in Midwest. I know there's others I'm totally blanking on right now, but I do think that sharing that experience, like literally like breaking it down in every detail, is something that would be really profound for the public to be able to experience. And that's just a dream of mine, absolutely, is to create a movie, even like a short film or something, that really depicts like what happened in the seminars and what happened in High Impact. So yeah, no, I do hope that through this, like, especially as things become more publicly, you know, out there, that there's going to be more opportunities for us to use that kind of creativity to get it out to the world. Yeah.
For sure. Speaking of Liz and Nelly, she actually might be coming on my podcast. I've actually been in contact with her, and I said, hey, I'd love to interview you. And she was like, that would be cool. She's like, do you know who I am? And so I did some research, and I was like, yeah, I kind of knew who you were, but now I know who you are. Like, know who you are.
She's awesome. Yeah, no, that would be a fun one. I'm definitely going to listen to that. She's badass. Like, I just love hearing her talk sometimes because she's just so funny. So yeah, no, yeah, that'll be cool.
For sure. Well, thank you guys so much for coming on, and we will for sure do a part 2. This was awesome. Thank you guys so much for coming on.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you
for having us.
Bye.
Bye.